Halito Chimachukma, this is Chief Steve coming at y'all with another episode of True Story. Now, before we get into it, smash that thumbs up button, like this video, and if you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell as well, so whenever I drop these bombs, you'll be the first one to grab them. Now, we got a pretty interesting one coming up, very intense, so y'all bear with me. I promise you, it's going to be worth the listen. So be sure to finish this video all the way through. It helps the algorithm and it helps the community as well as we get more eyes and ears to this channel. All right, y'all, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Alito, y'all. As you heard in the introduction, this is going to be a pretty intense segment. This is part 2 of our True Story episode here, coming out of the book A Question of Aborigines and the Law and Practice of Nations, including a collection of authorities and documents, by Alpheus Henry Snow. And in the last segment we were talking about, or the last episode rather, we were talking about basically how the law defines Aborigines and what their main tool of civilizing the uncivilized people are. And we went over the definitions of civilized and uncivilized and how it pertains to their culture and society compared to ours. And now we're going to go a little deeper into that tool and the instruction that was given to them in order to civilize the so-called uncivilized tribes, or the Aborigines. Okay, and we're going to be getting into a little more information, and I got some visual presentations to show you as well to close out. All right, so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and continue where we left off here, and that's on page 11. So let's go ahead and get into it. The committee recognized that the question of Aborigines was not a mere national one, but was one common to all colonizing nations, and virtually one of drawing a just line between that which is due to Aborigines as human beings and original occupants of the soil on the one part, and that which is due to the civilized world on the other part. Okay, so they did not, as we recognized in the last episode, they do not look at Aborigines in their pure form, as they're in their original form as civilized people. Okay, so that's where we get civilized, uncivilized. All right, so, and especially of preventing abuses of power by civilized states and their citizens as respects to the uncivilized people. All right, so they already knew that they were abusing their power, their so-called power, as a civilized state, as somebody who's occupying the land and that is colonized and to become an authority, a power within the soil. They knew that they were abusing that power, and not only were they as a government or as an institution abusing their power, their citizens, their so-called citizens, the ones who came over here, the foreigners, the settlers, were also abusing their status and, were mistreating the Aboriginal people, and thus why we had confrontations from the get-go. Thus it is said, it is not too much to say that the intercourse of Europeans in general, without any exception, in favor of the subjects of Great Britain has been, unless when attended by missionary exertions, a source of many calamities to uncivilized nations. All right, so they need to use their missionaries, they need to use religion in order to basically tie in with us. And it says, too often their territory has been usurped, their property seized, their numbers diminished, their character debased, the spread of civilization impeded. Okay, European vices and diseases have been introduced among them, and they have been familiarized with the use of our most potent instruments for the subtle or violent destruction of human life, vis-a-vis or brandy and gunpowder. So they literally brought alcohol and everything like that into the mix in order to destroy our civilization, to destroy our culture and our structure. That was their violent instruments, their instruments of for the subtle or violent destruction of human life. So it's not mass destruction, but it definitely is a subtle and violent destruction. It's a what they call it, a silent killer. Alcoholism, drug use, things of that nature. So and we still see that today, right? And then gunpowder. So they brought guns, gun violence and stuff like that. They brought that here. You know what I mean? We still were blacksmiths. We still created different things, and we had weaponry and things of that nature, including the bows, including the hatchets. We also had guns here as well, but they were the ones that brought the gun violence in the sense of unnecessarily violent destruction of human life. So let's keep on going. It is difficult to form an estimate of the less civilized nations liable to be influenced for good or for evil by contact and intercourse with the more civilized nations of the earth. It would appear that the barbarous regions likely to be more immediately affected by the policy of Great Britain are the South and West of Africa, Australia, the islands of the Pacific Ocean, a very extensive district of South America at the back of the Essequibo settlement between the rivers Orinoco and Amazon, with the immense tract which constitutes the most northerly part of the American continent and stretches from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. So basically, parts of South America all the way up to, basically Canada. So we were affected as the Aborigines out here. So wait, they're saying that there were Aborigines in North America already? Yes, that's what they're saying. So that's why they distinct us from South and West of Africa. Why would it have to go into any more had it be, if we all came from Africa? There were Aborigines, there were people that was on the soil from the beginning out here and in all these different places that they just mentioned before, the whole transatlantic slave trade fairy tale. And it just goes to show that Aborigines were everywhere. People populated this world, and not everybody came out of Africa. The out of Africa theory is just that, a theory, okay? So let's keep on going. Throughout the first part of the report, which is a statement of the facts relating to the abuse of civilized power, brought out by the evidence taken by the committee, the word Aborigines is not used. And we let y'all know in the last episode that Aborigines didn't start becoming a term until the 1830s, right? So this had to have been made before then. It says it's not used. It says where it would naturally be expected, the words savages, barbarous people, heathens, uncivilized nations, tribes, native inhabitants, or natives are used. Okay, the word Aborigines first occurs in the heading of the second part of the settlement of facts. Okay, so you look at all these different bywords and stuff: savages, barbarous peoples, heathens, uncivilized nations, tribes, native inhabitants or natives. These were all different terms used for the original people, back then. And by Great Britain to describe the original inhabitants of the Americas and of the world, period, where they had came and colonized the different colonized nations that were under British power at that point, European power at that point. So those original inhabitants were given these bywords. These are all bywords, right? And today, we see that the Aborigine, the so-called Aborigine, the original people, the copper-colored Indian, American Indian, is still being put under bywords today. And we're going to get into that a little more. But let's go ahead and read this heading. So the heading is as follows. This is when they first started using Aborigines. It says, effects of fair dealing combined with Christian instruction on Aborigines. So in order to deal with us fairly, they had to combine it with Christian instruction. In order for us to be deemed civilized and part of their culture and society, we had to accept their religion, which was, in an overall consensus, Christianity. All right? Christianity was a tool used to separate us from our society, from our culture, and to integrate us into theirs. And even in that integration, they still abused their power, and their citizens abused their status and things against us, against the Aborigines, so-called Aborigines, okay? So we're going to go ahead and read this. It says, in the foregoing survey, we have seen the desolating effects of the association of unprincipled Europeans with nations in a ruder state. There remains a more gratifying subject to which we have now to direct our attention, the effect of fair dealing and of Christian instruction upon heathens. Okay, so heathens was another thing that they were calling the original people, the original inhabitants. The instances are, unhappily, less numerous than those of an opposite character, but they are not less conclusive. And in reviewing the evidence before us, we find proof that every tribe of mankind is accessible to the remedial process, and that it has actually been partially applied and its benefits experienced in every quarter of the world. So that the main feature of the case before us being the ravages caused by Europeans, enough has been incidentally disclosed to show that those nations which have been exposed to our contamination might, they know that they are contaminants, exposed to our contamination might, during the same period, have been led forward to religion and civilization. So even though they're bringing all of their poison, they're bringing all of their destruction, they're bringing all of their contamination, still the little light at the end of the tunnel for them is that it leads them forward to, it leads the Aboriginals, the original people, the copper-colored Indians and the original inhabitants of the world that's been colonized, forward to religion and civilization. So they figure that's a little price to pay in order for them to be civilized, independently of the obligations of conscience to impact or to impart the blessings we enjoy. We have abundant proof that it is greatly for our advantage to have dealings with civilized men rather than with barbarians. So we rather be accused of doing all this negativity, all this destruction, and all this abuse and inhumanity to these people, as long as at the end of the day we're dealing with people who are basically integrated and assimilated into our society and culture. They understand us more. So it's more of like a breaking. It's like a breaking of culture, a breaking of societal structure in order to bring another people in to their way of life, into their way of thinking. And Christianity, as you heard right there, was a huge part of doing that. All right. And I just want y'all to know, ahead of time, I have nothing against Christian people. If you're a Christian person and you that's what you do, and you're a follower, a subscriber here, you're part of the community, hey, I have nothing against you, man. Nothing against you at all, sister. Nothing against you at all, brother. I mean, you do what you do. You know what I mean? But I want you to understand and overstand the true story of the origins and its impact, of this religion on the original people. This is true story. This is the half of the story that they don't tell us in the history books. This is the true story here, plain in black and white. And it says, we have next to express our conviction Wait, hold on. I think I'm finished this last part. Hold on. Let's see. I'll just read this again. Savages are... I don't think I finished that. Okay, so we have abundant proof that it's greatly for our advantage to have dealings with civilized men rather than with barbarians. We heard that. Savages are dangerous neighbors and unprofitable customers. And if they remain as degraded denizens of our colonies, they become a burden upon the state. So, if you did not conform to their ways, you were still considered a savage. You were considered a dangerous neighbor. You were considered an unprofitable customer, which means they won't deal with you on any kind of business level. They won't include you in their affairs, even though they're stealing and occupying a land that's not theirs. They won't include you into their business affairs. You are just not a human. You are not a man in their eyesight. And I don't even like to use the term human too much. It's man. We are man. We are not a type of man. We are not mankind. We are man. Okay, but they don't consider you one of them. They don't consider you somebody that is on equal value, and hence you would be an unprofitable customer, which means you have no value to them. And if they remain as degraded, if you remain as a degraded denizen or somebody that's being degraded, they are purposely degrading you as somebody who's holding on to your indigeneity and to your culture. You're being degraded. Then you become a burden to them. And what do people like to do with burdens? They like to relieve themselves of burdens, right? So this is where the whole unaliving and different things come into play. Jim Crow, everything else. And this is something that was publicated in 1919 and took place in the 1800s. All right, so they've been on this time. They've been on this time. And it's even before then, but they're putting it into writing at finally in this day and age, which is 19th century going in the early 20th century. And it says, we have next to express our conviction that there is but one effectual means of staying the evils we have occasioned, and of imparting the blessings of civilization. So it's so they are admitting that they are bringing evil, and they plan on maintaining that evil way, but at the same time imparting the blessings, the blessings of civilization. And that is the propagation of Christianity. Right there, right in front of you. This is the propagation of Christianity. They are pushing that religion. That cancels everything. All of their sins are forgiven as long as they bring Christianity into the hearts of the original people, together with the preservation for the time to come. So from this time and going on forward, of the civil rights of the natives. The civil rights of the natives. Again, the civil rights. So as long as they promise you civil rights and Christianity, they can do whatever they want to you. They can stay that evil. They can and keep imparting, and you'll still be considered one of them. You'll be considered part of the society, and not even as equal, but you'll still be considered part of their society. They'll give you enough respect to at least acknowledge you and acknowledge your existence, as long as they give you Christianity, and they'll also give you the civil rights. And let's, when we talk about civil rights, who are the people who fought in this land? Let's be real. Who are the people who fought in this land harder than any other people for civil rights? It was us. Everyone knows that it was us. When you think of civil rights, first person that comes to your mind is who? A Martin Luther King, right? An Aborigine, a so-called Aborigine, an American Indian, American Indians. It was a collective movement. But it wasn't nothing new. As you can see, this is something that they have implemented and something that they had put into play a long time ago. And this is something that we had to constantly get behind in order to, because why? Because they continue to stay the evils. They continue to stay the evils. They continue their evil ways and propagate their religion on us. And sometimes, and then this time, they, as together with the preservation, but sometimes they forget to preserve our rights, and then we have to fight again for civil rights to be acknowledged again. So sometimes they keep doing this shit, and they don't even want to acknowledge you as a person. They don't even want to acknowledge your existence as a person, as a living being, as somebody that's not animalistic, right? But then we have to remind them with these constant civil rights movements. And the last civil rights movement, it actually resulted in an act, the Civil Rights Act. And we're going to see exactly who was behind the Civil Rights Act right now. So we're going to pause for the cause, and we're going to go ahead and get into our first visual presentation, where we're going to show you first what who was a part of the civil rights, or who was the main component, the main composers of the civil rights movement, and the orchestrators of the civil rights movement, rather. All right, so let's go ahead and get into that. All right, y'all, again, if you haven't already, hit the like button, smash that thumbs up button. We need as many likes as we can possibly get in order for this algorithm to catch on. Be sure to share this video as well. Share all of my content with everyone that you know, those who need to know the true story that hasn't been told to us. And if you're new to this channel, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, because I want you to be the first one to know when these drop, so you can be the first one to let everyone know that the true story is being told. All right, so let's go ahead and continue with this segment. Alrighty, y'all, so here we are, the Civil Rights Act of 1968. That's the last Civil Rights Act that was signed into action. This is the Civil Rights Act that we are under still today. And this is, what is this called? What's the nickname of it? This is the Indian Civil Rights Act, the Indian Bill of Rights, right? You see that? Civil Rights Act of 1968. An act to prescribe penalties for certain acts of violence or intimidation and for other purposes, right? They knew about this. This is 1968. We're reading a book from the 1800s. They knew about this. They knew about this. And they kept playing in our faces until we reminded them again. Later on in the 20th century, again and again and again. And now they finally passed an act within their jurisdiction, an act to prescribe penalties for certain acts of violence or intimidation and for other purposes, right? And what is it? Who are they committing these violent acts and intimidation against? They're committing these acts of violence and intimidation against the Indians. Against the Indians. The Indian Civil Rights Act. They are violating the rights of the Aborigines. They're violating the rights of the Indian here in America. And now, since you know that, you know this to be true, now let's see who those Indians looked like. Pause for the cause and get to our visual presentation. All right, here we are. Here we are right here. The Civil Rights Act of 1968 bill signing. This occurred on April 11th, 1968. This is straight from the Lyndon B. Johnson library, the LBJ library. All right. You can subscribe to them, get more, or you can look at their channel. You'll find this right here. But look, right here. Let's get into this video. Before we even press play, who are they? Who is this song? And at 0 time, who's the first faces that you see? These are the Indians. These right here are the Indians. Why are they out here? Because they're waiting for their rights to be acknowledged. These are the Aborigines. Okay? Let's go ahead and play it.
Even while President Johnson talked to Chancellor Klaus about America's responsibility,
they know exactly who the Indians are. They know exactly who they're talking about here.
Congress had passed and sent to the White House the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Included in the measure was a landmark open housing bill, which, when fully effective, would forbid discrimination in approximately 80% of all housing offered for rent.
These are your Indians. Let's run it back so y'all can see.
Sent to the White House, the Civil Rights Act of 1968.
Civil Rights Act of 1968, same thing we just saw.
Included in the measure was a landmark open housing bill, which, when fully effective, would forbid discrimination in a...
This is your Aborigine. This is your Indian. This is the Indian Civil Rights Act. This is the Indian. These are the Indians that they're talking about. That's an Indian.
Approximately 80% of all housing.
There's another American Indian.
Offered for rent or for sale in the United...
There's another American Indian.
States.
These are your Indians.
I do not exaggerate when I say that the proudest moments of my presidency have been times such as this, when I have signed into law the promises of a century. I shall never forget that it is more than 100 years ago when Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. But it was a proclamation. It was not a fact.
He said the Emancipation Proclamation was a proclamation and not a fact, which means it was just proclaimed, but it wasn't legit. That's basically what he's saying. So he's openly admitting basically that they've been playing in our faces for years. Not a lot of people will tell you this. Not a lot of people go over this. So I want y'all to like this video, because nobody has really showed anyone and really pointed out what he had just said. The Emancipation Proclamation was just a proclamation and not a fact. So this was an actual bill that was for the Indians, specifically drawn up for the American Indian.
And in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we affirmed through law that men equal under God are also equal when they seek a job, when they go to get a meal in a restaurant, or when they seek lodging for the night in any state in the Union. And now the Negro families no longer suffer the humiliation of being turned away because of their race.
And we're going to get into that soon, because we find out later that that's still bullshit, even though they did sign into effect. But what they say, as long as we promise them their civil rights, as long as we preserve their civil rights. So this was a preservation. Just like he was talking shit on Abe Lincoln, talking about that was just a proclamation. This right here that he's doing back in 1964 and back in 1968, these were just preservations. just preservations. And what would we read about in the last paragraph before we got here? They're making preservations. They can still stay their evils, right? They're still staying the evils and still pushing their religion and still trying to civilize and doing whatever they want to do. But at the same time, as long as they preserve our civil rights, and this bill that he's signing is an act of preservation, they can still continue to do whatever they want to do.
In the Civil Rights Act of 1965, we affirm through law for every citizen in this land the most basic right of democracy, the right of a citizen to vote in an election in his.
So 64, they said, oh, you can stay where you want. You can, we won't mess with you. You can go and eat where you want. Basically, desegregation. You can basically come and do what you. And then 65, they basically said, oh, well, now, you can vote. We're gonna give you the chance to vote, right? And you see how he's still using these bywords instead of calling us heathens and savages. Now they're calling us blacks and Negroes. Instead of being called a heathen and a savage, you're being called a black and a Negro. But now we can acknowledge you. Right? These civil rights acts were nothing more than preservations for them to keep doing what they're doing, but still putting a little bit of respect on you enough to acknowledge your existence, to keep you pacified, basically. Keep us pacified. Let's be real.
Country. In the 5 states where the act had its greater impact, Negro voter registration has already more than doubled. Now with this bill, the voice of justice speaks again. It proclaims that fair housing for all human beings who live in this country is now a part of the American way of life. We all know that the roots of injustice run deep. But violence cannot redress a solitary wrong or remedy a single unfairness. And we just must put our shoulders together and put a stop to both. The time is here. Action must be now.
All right, y'all see that? So they know that they were keeping up with their violent ways, and now, he made some good word salad there, and basically said, well, now we gonna stop the violence. This preservation alone is gonna stop the violence. But we all know, and we just saw in that last part of the reading, that they're able to stay. They're gonna be staying their evil. They can keep doing whatever they want to do with us, as long as the Christianity is being propagated and the civil rights are being preserved. So without further ado, we're going to keep going into the book and start wrapping it up. Again, family, make sure that you like this video. Share. If you made it this far, make sure you hit the thumbs up, man. I need these videos to get out there. We all need these videos to get out there. This is the true story that has not been told to our people in a way that it has ever been told, period. So let's just get this out there. Make sure, if you're new to the channel, subscribe to this. Hit that notification bell, because we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want you to be able to be the first one to see these when they drop, because we ain't stopping no time soon. All right, let's go on and get into it. Let's finish up here. Alrighty, so we saw, and we're gonna read that one more time for the ones in the back. We have next to express our conviction that there is but one effectual means of staying the evils we have occasioned, which is to basically pacify the evils that we have occasioned, and of imparting the blessings of civilization. And that is the propagation of Christianity together with the preservation for the time to come. So time and time again, no matter how many times we got to do it, we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep preserving the civil rights of the natives. So really, what is civil rights? Other than just a ways and a means to pacify us while they continue to bring injustice towards us. Anyway, let's keep going. Let's wrap this up. We have seen that a mere acquaintance with civilized men by no means prepares savages to receive Christianity. So not mere acquaintance. Mere acquaintance with civilized men is no means. So it's not just to interact. It says, in that kind of civilization which alone can be advantageous to them or ourselves. It says, we further find in the evidence before us that benevolent attempts have been made to instruct savages in the arts of civilized life. So you know who the savages are now. You see who they call and who they have bywords for left and right? So yeah, savages, they try to, instruct them and stuff, and it's been benevolent attempts, right? It says, for the purpose of improving their condition and gradually preparing them for the truths of the gospel. So they're coming out here, interacting with us, not to be colleagues, not to be or anything of that nature. They don't want to be needy. They don't want to be part of what we got going on. They're not trying to live cohesively and cooperatively. They're trying to strip you of what you have and prepare you to receive their way of life, receive the truths of their gospel. And that these attempts have been signally unsuccessful. So at first we were resisting. We weren't buying into it. And you can tell by all the Indian wars that have gone on, everything that's happened, all the bloodshed and everything that, and even the animosity that's been brought from generation to generation. Things did not go exactly what they wanted to do, but it says right here, so complete indeed has been the failure of the merely civilizing plan with various tribes of Indians that intelligent Americans have been led to adopt the conclusion that it is. So these are now they're calling intelligent Americans. That's their settlers. That's their European settlers that have been brought out here, that have been, now that they have a civilization established and they have, now they're citizens within this civilization. They're considering themselves now Americans. Like I said, this was 1800s. The 1828 dictionary shows you what an American is. An American is an aborigine, a copper-colored aborigine, and it also pertains to who? The European settlers. So now they're saying Americans. So you're not even considered an American until you're considered an aborigine, and you're not even considered an aborigine or acknowledged as an aborigine until you have been civilized within this society and culture, right? So the intelligent Americans, and even if you have been considered an American and have been considered somebody that is assimilated and integrated into this society and culture, you are still different from them. They still look at you as different. We showed that in the last episode, and now they're showing you again, because they're distincting the Indians from who? Intelligent Americans. And who do they consider intelligent Americans? The intelligent Americans are these European settlers that have came out here that are now called citizens of America, right? Citizens of this corporation. And it says, intelligent Americans have been led to adopt the conclusion that it is necessary to banish the Indians from the neighborhood of the white population. I'll read that again, because I've been ranting. I'm trying not to rant too much, but I'm dropping one more time. It says, so complete indeed has been the failure of the merely civilizing plan with various tribes of Indians, right? Those who they feel that they are not civilized, those that they feel that are not capable of accepting their ways or have not fully integrated into their society and their culture and their way of life. Basically, those who still remind them of that so-called savagery and heathenry, that heathenistic way that irks them so much, which is nothing more than our original way of life, the way that we originally do things, having our own culture, having our own flavor, not appealing or appeasing or assimilating to the way that they want us to act and do things, right? So when they see that and something that reminds them of that, they've been led to adopt the conclusion that it is necessary to banish the Indians from where? The neighborhood of the white population, on the supposition that they are not capable of being reclaimed or elevated, into a civilized or well-ordered community. So they think that their communities and their neighborhoods are elevated and well civilized. And when we try to come into their neighborhoods, oh no, it ain't happening. It's nah. They need to be banished. And we've seen that even after this Civil Rights Act, and we're fast forwarding over 100 years now at this point, we've seen that after they've continually reassured and preserved the civil rights, we've seen that happen regardless throughout time, especially throughout the 20th century, throughout time of them not wanting to be around us or banishing us from their neighborhoods. And we're going to pause for the cause, and we're going to end it on this last visual presentation. All right, as you can see right here, it says black family tried to move to an all-white neighborhood in Rosedale, Queens. What time? 1976. What? 8 years after LBJ basically signed that Civil Rights Act, saying that basically, oh yeah, the violence is over. The violence is ended. We need to stop. Everybody's going to be equally in fair housing and everything like that. Everybody has the right to fair housing and no violence. We're ending the violence right here and right now. We're standing shoulder to shoulder and ending it right here and right now. 8 years ago, right? And now fast forward 8 years later, this is what's happening. I'm gonna go ahead and shut up and go ahead and let this go ahead and move, man, because I'm getting a little woo, but you know, it even warns you right here. It's hard to watch. So go ahead, watch this. Like I said, this is intense, but this is the true story. All right. So by all means, let's get into it.
Since 1960, more than 1 million whites have left New York City. The black and Hispanic population has grown by almost 1 million, and it's still growing. This is Rosedale, a community of 6,000 families in the far southeastern pocket of the borough of Queens. To the passing eye, it seems quiet. Modest 1- and 2-family homes with fenced-in lawns and tree-shaded streets. The people who live here are almost all white. Working-class Americans of Italian, Irish, and Jewish roots. They've worked all their lives to afford these homes. Many came from the inner city, refugees from neighborhoods in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and South Jamaica. Neighborhoods they saw changing and dangerous to live in. These people saved their money and made their escape to what they called the last frontier in New York City, to Rosedale, to what they hoped would be a safe and quiet life. In the early 1970s, a few middle-class black families with very much the same idea in mind began to move to Rosedale too.
Real quick. I'm trying not to pause it. Real quick. You see how they throw in the bywords. Black is another word for savage at this point. Negro is another word for savage at this point. They were escaping where? These different urban areas where it was mainly what? Blacks and Negroes and who? So-called Hispanics, right? But we know that the so-called Hispanics are actually who? Our Latino Nijis, our Latino Indians, right? Our Latin Indians from down south and in the Central Americas, right? That came up out here and that have been out here, because we know that the West Coast and everything else, a lot of part of this so-called United States was a part of so-called what? Mexico or Latin America, because this was all one landmass at one point. So for you to try to, now they're separated. They did that agenda of separation. They're calling it blacks and Latinos, or Negroes and Latinos, or Negroes and Hispanics, blacks and Hispanics, right? But we all know that they all got us in the same areas, in the same neighborhoods. Why? Because we're all Aborigines. We are all Indians. We are all American Indians from this soil, the original inhabitants from this soil. But now these, what do they say? These Jewish, Italians, and it said others as well. I think German as well said they're different. They're what? They're refugees of these urban areas that have escaped. That have just escaped, and in so many words, they're trying to make it seem like, oh, this is just such a savage place. This is such a violent and destructive area that they just escaped this third world of a state of, third world of a city in the inner cities of New York to come to this little suburban area, right? Okay, so that's just putting context on it. I'm gonna stop right there, and I ain't gonna start again until this is over. But yeah, I just had to throw some context onto there. All right, here we go.
The whites saw their coming as a threat, the forerunner of more blacks bringing crime, blight, and poor services they had witnessed in other neighborhoods in the city, and the peace of Rosedale was shattered. In 1971, a score of men and teenage boys using axes and picks nearly destroyed a house reportedly bought by a black man married to a white woman. 200 residents stood by and watched. Since then, more than 10 acts of violence have been aimed at the few blacks living in Rosedale. The tension escalated with the coming of the Spencers. In the summer of '74, Tony and Glenda Spencer bought this 7-room house on 136th Avenue. They came to New York from the West Indies after living in London. Spencer, a photo engraver in Manhattan, said they just wanted a good place to live. But some whites suspected them of blockbusting, of trying to force lower property values on Rosedale homes so other blacks could afford to buy here. Before the Spencers moved in, their house was set on fire with gasoline. They moved anyway. On New Year's Eve day a year ago, while the Spencers and their sons slept, a pipe bomb exploded on the porch and smashed through the windows of the house. Police said the bomb was intended to wipe out the family. Attached to the bomb was a note that read, "Nigger, be warned. We have time. We will get your firstborn first." It was signed, "Viva Boston, KKK."
I'm sorry, guys. These, again, they wanted to banish the Indians out of their white neighborhoods. For those of y'all who don't know who the Indians are, now you do. Now you do.
You best better turn around, y'all. And don't come back. Don't come back. Don't come back. It's a new boy. You want it with that.
Come on, y'all. We were riding down this block, and these white people start saying, "Get out of here, niggas. get out of my neighborhood. Don't come to this neighborhood. Then they start hitting on her.
Throwing rocks and everything else.
Throwing rocks. Because we were in their neighborhood.
We went on a bike hike to McDonald's. We didn't mean to bother anybody.
We had a nice sword parade
We
down
saw a
there.
gathering, so we went down there to see what was happening. All right. I mean, we didn't bother anybody. We weren't looking for trouble. I never even know people around here were like that. I've never experienced anything like this in my life.
What happened to you?
Nothing happened to me, but this little boy, short boy about my size, or little short, had picked up a rock, and he was in the front of all these tall hunkies. But he threw the rock. He tried to hit my sister, but he almost hit me about that much away from me. And I was sure where she had. It hit me with that rock. I would pick up the rock right next to me and hit him right dead in his face. They always say niggas are doing everything. They always say we're doing everything, right? We didn't, every time the white people come down, we don't push them out their neighborhood and throw rocks and start hitting them. We don't bother the white people around our neighborhood, but when we get in a white neighborhood, they just push us out.
Yeah. Everybody was upset. So we're nothing, they were a piece of dirt, dogs. I mean, that's the way you treat an animal. I mean, God, we're human beings. You don't treat other people like that. It's just wrong. Black, white, I don't care. A person is a person. Skin should have no bearing on how you treat a person. That's just wrong.
I hate their goddamn guts.
I can't say that I hate them. I can't say that it's totally the kids' fault. I mean, I'm sure their parents had some bearing on the way they feel and everything else. I think it's just a system. I don't know. I can't say that I hate them because I don't hate anybody.
Do you forgive them?
No. No. Can't take back no hurt. But they gonna always do that. They always spit on us like we some dogs. They always gonna spit back on them. Ain't nothing gonna change.
People at a certain age group has no idea that this took place at all.
This morning.
All right, so y'all seen it for yourselves. These were the Indians that they're banishing from their neighborhoods. These are the Indians that are not considered one of them, that are not considered a part of their society, a part of their culture, despite continuously propagating religion and continually preserving their civil rights. Like I said, just 8 years before this happened, they signed a whole bunch of civil rights bills, right? But they're still able to stay the evil as long as they continue to do those two things, as long as they keep those things in effect. But this again is for educational purposes, and I'm just showing y'all once again who indeed are the Aborigines that are being talked about in this book. Alright, but we gonna go ahead and end it on this note. Like I said ahead of time, I know it's triggering, I know it's hard to watch, yet this is indeed the true story, unfiltered, and you're gonna get it every time. So continue to be watching, stay tuned, like this video again, share. People need to hear these hard truths. They need to see these hard truths. They need to be reminded. They need to be reminded of who the Aborigines truly are. Okay? This is the face of an American Indian. These are the faces of the Aborigines here in America, in the so-called United States. So on that note, like I said, we're going to go ahead and conclude it. Y'all be ready for part 3 coming soon. Until then, Tatakista, I cherish each and every one of you. from the bottom of my heart. Because you all are something. You guys are worth everything. We are more valuable than any precious mineral on this planet, and they know it. That's why they try their hardest to try to persuade us otherwise. Yet at the same time, they take what's ours. They take our land. They take our culture. They take our way of doing things. And then try to make it theirs and try to flip it and say, oh, you need to be accepted with us. And really, we've been doing this. We've been living. We've been surviving. And we've been thriving way before they even got here. So when I say Tatakista, I cherish y'all. I cherish you more than anything in this world. So we are all we got. So let's cherish one another. Let's continue to build. Part 3 coming soon. Tatakista, I cherish you, and Yakoki. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.